Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The hour is 7 o'clock, and as mayor, I hereby call to order this meeting of the Laconia City Council scheduled for August 12, 2019 at this time. As always, we'll begin our meeting tonight with a salute to our American flag. I would ask that you please rise and join Councilor David Bounds in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll note for the record that the minutes to tonight's meeting are being kept by our city clerk, Cheryl Hebert, and at this time I would ask that she please call the roll.
Counselor Cheney.
Here.
Counselor Bounds.
Here.
Counselor Littman.
Present.
Counselor Haynes.
Here.
Counselor Hamel.
Present.
Counselor Hosmer.
Here.
Mayor Engler.
Here. Let the record show that all 6 councilors are present this evening and a quorum has been established for this meeting. We'll also have the record show that we are joined at the front table tonight by our city manager, Scott Myers, and by our city finance director, Glenn Smith. First order of regular business tonight is acceptance of minutes. Councilors, you have before you tonight the minutes from our last meeting, which was held on July 24th. July 22nd. Those minutes were distributed 2 days later, and as of this time, no corrections or changes have been suggested for them, so unless there are any at this hour, I'm going to declare that the minutes to our meeting of July 22nd, 2019 are accepted as presented by the clerk. Consent and action items. We have one tonight, and that is the annual request from the Weirs Action Committee to use Endicott Rock parking lot for Laconia Motorcycle Week parking fundraiser for that group from June 13th through June 21st, 2020. That request is on page 15 of your packet. So a motion would be in order to approve the request by the Weirs Action Committee to use Endicott Rock parking lot for Motorcycle Week parking fundraiser from June 13, 2020 through June 21, 2020. Councilor Hosmer makes that motion, seconded by Councilor Hamel. Thank you. Any discussion? Councilor Hamel.
Yes, I'd like to, as we do pretty much every year, request a financial report to the city, for the city council on that. Scott, please.
I will get one for you.
So we did not, with the application, we did not get a financial report
We
this
did
year?
not receive one, no.
Okay. That should be every year. Any other discussion? All those in favor, please raise a hand. 6 votes in the affirmative, that motion carries unanimously. All right, we have one interview tonight. Ori Gibbs seeking reappointment as a regular member of the Zoning Board of Adjustment for a 3-year term expiring in August 2022. Ms. Gibbs, welcome.
Thank you.
If you could just give us your name and where you live and tell us briefly why you'd like to be reappointed, please.
My name is Ori Gibbs. I live at 167 Tiffany Drive, up in Briarcrest. I would like to be reappointed to the board. I've served on it for 10 years. I'm really finally comfortable. The last couple of years, I've really kind of come in my own, I think. It was a very long learning curve, I felt. But I think that now I'm well established. I understand the process well, and I think that as a regular member with this degree, this number of years of experience, that I have a lot to offer the city in serving on this board. And I also have, I'm a real estate paralegal, so I have background in that as well.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments for Ms. Gibbs?
Just thank you for your service.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
No, same goes for all of us. Thank you very
Well,
much. All right, so you're the only interview tonight, so I'll just need to say this to you and nobody else, and that is that by board policy, By council policy, we do interviews on the first meeting of a month, and we have the actual vote elections on the second meeting of a month. So we will have the election on this position at our next meeting. It's not necessary for you to be there. You can,
Okay.
you're welcome to come if you like, but it's not necessary.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Counselor Hamel?
Number 9.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll back up to that. Thank you.
Skip to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
While we're on this subject, though, I'd like to, in the memorandum, Mr. Myers, it says there are no vacant regular positions on the zoning board of adjustment, and I thought we had one.
I can double check that for you. I know we have several alternate positions there that are listed below, but let me double check that for you.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe that there are 5 full members right now, and I'm
Do
one
you
of
have
them.
5 board members?
I'm one of them, and my term expires at the end of August,
Okay.
so.
But I do think we might have had a recent communication that may not have made its way through everything that you're referring to.
That's
and
what I
I'll-
was referring to.
I'll double
I
check
thought
that.
we had a
There was,
resignation.
actually, there was a resignation. That's right. Yeah, there was a resignation.
So we'll double check that and get if it needs to be corrected. We'll confirm it with the council one way or the other tomorrow, once Nancy's in the office.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Counselor Hamel, for reminding me that I skipped over item 9. We'll go back to that now, and that is citizen comments for matters not on the agenda. This is the appropriate place in tonight's agenda for anyone who is with us tonight who wishes to address the council on a matter that is not on tonight's agenda, not on tonight's agenda. Does that description fit anyone tonight and why you're here? Yes, you have a question?
We're not sure if we were on the agenda or not. It's Belknap County Democrat. We're not sure if we're formally on the agenda or not. Belknap County Democrats we
Yes.
are on the agenda. Okay,
you are.
thank you.
Okay, anyone else? I'm sorry, Senator,
I'm not sure, is the...
can you come to the microphone, please?
Thank you. Is the park, the change of the park in Lakeport with the proposed parking lot on the agenda tonight?
It's on the agenda only in the sense that there's a memorandum that the council's attention will be called to. It's not on the agenda in terms of any action, but if you would like to address that, I would recognize you at this time.
I would, thank you very much. My name's Harold French. I don't live in Laconia, but I represent Laconia as senator for District 7. I came tonight to discuss this with the council, and thank you for taking the time to listen. I have heard from many of our constituents in the area, in the Lakeport area, that they are very upset with the thought of losing some of that park space for parking. And I wanted to bring that to your attention and ask you to, when it does come up, for you to discuss and to vote on, to really take into consideration what you'll be losing by doing so. And that's why I came. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So is there anyone else here tonight who wants to address that same issue?
Hello, my name is Callista Wilson. I live on 79 Lincoln Street, number 2. I did a petition on August 2nd for the park and the green space at Sanborn Park in Lakeport. And I'm not sure if I can give you this yet, or if I have to wait to see if you guys open up comments from the public on having another meeting. I've never been to one of these meetings, so
So you already have the petition?
I do.
So just, you're welcome to give that to the clerk and she
Okay,
can distribute
and
it.
I have copies for everybody.
Thank you.
Just give them to the clerk, she'll distribute them, thank you.
And I received 125 signatures. It was a short time, but some people that I had talked to were really concerned about losing the green space. I use it about a couple years ago. I did try to get the Parks and Rec to talk to them about maybe redoing the diamond in the green space because it is completely overgrown. My son plays baseball, and we use that field for practice. Also, I have a couple people that are on the lacrosse team that have also shown some concern because they also use that field for practice when there's no open fields available. And I've used that field since I was younger because I grew up in that area. Both my grandparents live on Mechanic Street. And I just think that that space is something that you could lose and not get back, so that's it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? I got a lady behind you first, then I'll recognize you.
Good evening. My name is Dawn Howe, and
Can
I
you
live at
Scooch over
151.
toward the microphone, please.
I'm sorry, I'm legally blind.
Closer to it. There you go. Thank you.
My name is Dawn Howe, and I live at 151 Mechanic Street, Apartment 3. I've been a resident of the neighborhood for close to 20 years. I've been in Laconia since 1989. I have major concerns with the park field possibly going into a parking lot. We have very narrow roads. In the wintertime, the snow on that side of the sidewalk gets to be 6 foot high, and we lose that. I'm legally blind. I can't tell you how many times I've been nearly hit coming through, crossing the walkway at Clinton Street and Mechanic Street. I live directly across from the High Rises parking lot. There's several handicapped people that live there, are out in our neighborhood in their wheelchairs. So bringing the extra traffic in on our narrow roads and in an intersection that a lot of people don't stop coming down Mechanic Street. It's a touch and go, and they don't even look. So my grandson plays at that park. My daughter played at that park. I walk my dog there, as do several of the residents in the neighborhood. I wake up in the morning, and that's what I see is that field. I can't tell you how many pictures I have of sunsets there, and I'd like that to continue. I'd rather hear kids laughing and playing than car doors and car alarms. It's a big safety thing, and we don't have a lot in Lakeport. Our kids would be made to cross over Union Ave and head to Levitt Park, which is not a good thing for these little kids. Having that park there is a lot. It gets used by the neighborhood. We've had many barbecues there. There's a lot of families that have their family get-togethers, birthday parties. The police station has also, and the fire department has also used that field for get-togethers to get the neighborhood in and communicating with the police. So I think it would not be a good idea to bring that parking lot into that area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Spanos, you wanted to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. For the record, Peter Spanos, I represent District 3 here in Laconia. I've had constituents reach out to me with concerns that have already been expressed. And in my opinion, we don't exactly have an abundance of open space for kids to play outside and play ball. And on a personal note, and it was some years ago, my own kids played baseball there and soccer as well. And I think that with what we're trying to do, particularly in the summertime, in giving kids outdoor activities in which they can put their energies in, I don't think it's a very, very good idea to take away this green space. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name's Karen Hall. I am the property owner of 72 Clinton Street. My backyard is separated by the fence to that field. I've been there 27 years. That field is used daily. Dog walkers, children playing, people having picnics. No, that should not disappear. Absolutely not. I purchased my home to raise my kids because of that field, that park. Now my grandchildren are being raised with that field and that park, and I'd like to continue that. I don't choose to look out my window at a parking lot full of who knows what. You put a parking lot off the off-beaten path, what are we gonna get? We're gonna get drug deals. We're gonna get homeless sleeping in their cars. That's not what I want in my backyard. That's not what our neighborhood is looking for. Most of the people in our neighborhood purchased for our children in that park and field. I have no idea who came up with this idea. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous.
Okay.
Thank you.
I hope somebody does something about it. Taking away from Lakeport's not fair.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
We've been talking about it.
Okay, thank you. Next thing up is, in fact, communications, and call your attention, counselors, to page 20 of your packet, and that is in fact a memorandum on this subject from Counselor Bounds and the city manager with regard to addressing the need for additional parking in the Lakeport area for the redevelopment of the businesses and buildings on Union Avenue or near Union Avenue that we've talked about, and announcements have been made recently and with regard to that kind of development, and we all know that there's been that a lack of available parking has been a significant obstacle toward redevelopment, if you will, of that area. So you have the memorandum here, and there's no action required on this tonight. It's simply a report from Counselor Bounds, who's the counselor for that ward, and from the city manager. And this is just no one has made a proposal at this point in time. So it's just for your information kind of thing at this point. Anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I guess I'll step into the fray if I might. I'm listening to what you all have to say about the parking at Sanborn Park and the proposal. This proposal is simply that, a proposal. There is a significant parking problem in Lakeport, which everybody is aware of. I'm not suggesting this should happen, could happen. What I am suggesting is that we should open this up for discussions. We've been approached by business owners in the area who are looking for a solution to their businesses and future parking. So I'm not an advocate for or against it at this point, but I am an advocate for a discussion about it and where that might lead. So what I would hope that would happen is that the business leaders who have approached the city would get together and come to our next meeting of the city council, and you're all invited too. Please come, express yourself, to explore that issue. A parking lot in Sanborn Park may not be the solution, but I think it's worthy of discussion. So, there you go.
All right, anyone else?
Yes, I'd like to make.
Counselor Haynes?
I know it was a Sunday, and I deliberately went and looked at the green space, and I am an advocate of the green space. However, just for kicks and giggles, I went across to what I believe used to be the Anchor Darling parking lot, where Carpenter Patterson was, where O's is presently now. It looks like that parking lot, there's a lot of parking spaces. And it looks to me, I'll grant you it was a Sunday afternoon, but it just looked like that was totally not used at all. The upper spaces, and there's a walkway that goes up on to the sidewalk into the Elm Street
So
corner.
that parking lot is privately owned. you're
I
aware of
understand that, but I'm just wondering if we might explore the fact of coming to agreement. I mean, if we're gonna need parking spaces, if we could come to an agreement with whoever owns that and utilize that parking area instead of the green space.
I think
I'm
those-
open to all suggestions.
Well,
I'm
it's just
saying-
an observation.
Yeah, I'm just saying we should put this on the table and move forward with the discussion about it. And move forward with the discussion about it, that's
That's
all.
fine.
That's all I'm saying. I'm not an advocate for the parking lot at Sanborn Park.
I
I'm
understand.
not an advocate against it. I'm just saying, let's explore it.
Anyone else want to weigh in at this point? Counselor Hamel?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Laconia also, and we used to play ball over there too. Every once in a while, would move around park houses, parkland and stuff, play ball. There's not a lot of green space left in that area of
That's true.
Lakeport, and I would be totally against this. It wouldn't even cross my mind to take that as a parking lot. Doesn't make any sense. There's other areas there that could be looked at if people want to purchase old buildings or whatever, but kids need a place to go. That ball field's been there ever since I can remember. We just spent a ton of money on redoing that park, putting a lot of elements in it and a new fence and everything, and I just cannot see that as a parking lot. So,
You know that the
that's my 2 cents.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Like I said, this is just a memorandum to bring to you all attention. I think if I don't think anyone has suggested, if I can say this at this point in time, that the city turn that field into a parking lot. I think the issue is that's being brought to us if a developer, a property developer, or a group of property builder owners came to us with a proposal to sell it or lease it to them for that purpose, would we be interested in having that discussion? I think that's how this came up and where it's going. So it would be, as Councilor Bowen said, it would be, their initiative would have to be to come to us and make such a proposal. Okay, we're not initiating the proposal ourselves. Fair enough?
That's fair enough.
Okay, we have 2 public hearings necessary tonight. We discussed this at our last meeting. We've already had public hearings on these 2 subjects, and hopefully this will go very quickly tonight. This has to do with 2 issues that we passed back in June with regard to authorizing bond borrowings for purpose of road repair, and it turned out that we had made a procedural mistake in notification for those meetings, so we have to do it again. So that's what we're doing tonight again. This is to hold a public hearing, and then later tonight, take a second vote on this again. So the first public hearing has to do with resolution number 16, relative to authorizing the city manager to take any actions necessary to issue bonds for Court Street reconstruction Phase 2, fire engine replacement, and adding a new public works truck in the amount of $2,225,000. Okay, and notice of this public hearing was made available in the July 24, 2019 edition of the Laconia Daily Sun. It was also posted at Laconia City Hall, at the Community Center, at the Public Library, and at the SAU office. So I am going to officially open this public hearing at 7:24 and ask if there's anyone with us tonight who wishes to offer comment to the council on Resolution 16 relative to authorizing the borrowing of $2,025,000. No one's coming forward, so I'll close the public hearing at 7:25 PM, and we'll move on to the next one. And that is Resolution 17, relative to authorizing the city manager to take any actions necessary to issue bonds for Endicott Street Water Line Project, Court Street Bridge Replacement Project, and sewer upgrades, Union Avenue and Lakeport Elm Street Project in the total amount of $2,250,000. Notice of this public hearing was made available in the July 24, 2019 edition of the Laconia Daily Sun. It was posted at City Hall, at the Laconia Public, at City Hall, at the Community Center, at the Public Library, and at the SAU office. Of note is the city has secured a 2.755 interest rate for a 20-year borrowing on this. So I'm going to open this public hearing at 7:25 PM and ask if there's anyone with us tonight who wishes to address the council on the matter of adoption of resolution number 17 for the borrowing of $2,250,000. No one coming forward, so I will close that public hearing at 7:26 PM and remind everyone that we will be voting on these two issues again tonight under unfinished business. We have no presentations tonight. Mayor's report, I'll be very brief. I just want to remind everyone with us tonight and our public watching on TV that we are in the midst now of our biannual filing period for public office for city elections. That filing period opened last Wednesday and closes this Friday. And people who are interested in running municipal office, everywhere from mayor and city council and on down, who wishes to be a candidate, just needs to visit the city clerk's office between 8:30 and 4:30 PM.
Until 5 on Friday.
Oh, we got an extra half hour on Friday for the late filers. So the clerk's office will be open an extra half hour on Friday afternoon for those of you who are debating amongst yourselves. If you've ever thought about running for public office for city council or mayor or whatever, that filing period remains open then until 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon. If, as we know now, under the current city charter, if there are more than 2 candidates in any race, there will be a primary on Tuesday, September 10th. The purpose of that primary is to narrow the field down to 2 candidates. And then those 2 candidates will run in the general election, which is scheduled for November 5th, Tuesday, November 5th, 2019. And if there are no more than 2 candidates filed for any individual race, remind us all that the clerk has the privilege of declaring the need for a primary to be unnecessary. And so therefore, no primary election would be held, and those 2 candidates would proceed directly to the general election in November. Committee reports. Anyone have a committee report tonight? Any committee business? Counselor Bounds.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. The issue of the petition for the motorcycle noise reduction on Scenic and Watson Road was raised at our last meeting. I think everybody got copies of that petition the following day, thanks to the city manager. I've reviewed it. It's a toying cost for me, whether it's public safety or government operations, but I'm going to take it as government operations and ordinances unless somebody thinks it's more appropriate for public safety. But either way, I'm the chairman, like it or not. Councilor Hosmer is on both committees, and Councilor Littman is on public safety. Councilor Cheney is government operations and ordinances. But I would like to schedule this for.
Well, let's add it to the agenda first. So you're going to make a motion to add Scenic Road motorcycle noise complaint petition?
Yes.
To the business of the Government Operations and Ordinances Committee as item 7.
Okay.
Correct?
I'm going with you on this. Procedurally, if that's how we do it, then that would be item.
It's not on the agenda now, so we
Okay,
need
so
to add that.
so we'd add that as item 7.
All right.
And then schedule a meeting.
So would you second that, Counselor Cheney?
I would.
All right, Counselor Cheney seconds that motion. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise a hand. 6 votes in the affirmative. And that is now item 7 on your agenda. And so now you want to schedule a hearing for that?
Yeah.
Or a meeting, rather?
Want to schedule a subcommittee meeting or whatever you want to call it for the next council meeting? We'll do it at 6:30? 6?
All
Oh,
right.
you got something going?
So Counselor
Oh, wait a minute.
Bounds makes a motion to schedule a meeting of government operations and ordinances for 6:30 PM on August 26th.
Counselor Hamel tells me that
Sorry?
there's a conflict
It's
for that.
the 22nd, I believe, is the next meeting. And I have a land and build, huh?
It's the 26th.
26th. I have a land and buildings committee meeting that night, I believe at 6:30.
Yeah.
Right,
Okay,
For parking.
for
garage.
parking garage.
Yes.
okay, so we'll do it at,
I guess we could have simultaneous meetings, could we not?
Well, if he wants to do it his at 6, that's fine. How can you have them simultaneously?
Yeah, subcommittee meetings?
no, I don't want to get dueling committees. Let's just schedule it for the first Monday of September, which is what?
The first Monday meeting date of September?
Yeah.
September 5th, is it?
9th.
Would be the 9th.
That
I'm
would be
sorry, it
the
would be the,
All right, so you want
Would
to
be
change
the
that to
8th, right?
September 9th?
it's Labor Day is the first, so we
Yep.
don't change, it'd be the 8th. Oh, I'm sorry, I went back a month. Whoop, I'm in July, never mind. Let's go with the 9th.
So I think Labor Day falls in the 2nd, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So this will be on the 9th, and we'll do it at 6:30. I'm not sure, we'll need more time than that. If anybody thinks we should do it at 6, let me know.
Let me check with the folks who have sent us the petition and see how many folks they think will be coming.
Well, I'd just rather go ahead and schedule, so why don't we be safe? We'll schedule it at 6. If we get a little breathing space, we get a little breathing space.
All right, Counselor Bounds makes a motion to schedule a meeting of government operations and ordinances to take up item number 7 on their agenda at 6 PM on September 9th,
Thanks.
correct?
Correct.
And that was seconded by Counselor Cheney. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise a hand. 6 votes in the affirmative, that motion carries. Thank you. All right. And then a reminder then that Counselor Hamel has scheduled a meeting for which committee?
Land and buildings
Land and
for the
buildings.
parking garage.
Downtown parking garage. For August 26th.
Right.
At 6 PM again?
6:30.
6:30.
It's just gonna be to go over some options.
Those additional figures you asked for? Okay. All right, any other committee business tonight? Counselor Bounds, may I ask you what the status of regulation of short-term residential rental businesses is?
Yes. It was sent out to public hearing by the planning board at their last meeting. It will come back for the public hearing at the first meeting in September. And then the planning board will make a decision as to whether to recommend it to or not recommend it to the
So
council.
they're holding a second public hearing?
I think that this is the first public hearing, yeah. There wasn't a public hearing scheduled before. It went to a subcommittee meeting. There was discussions about what should be contained in it. There was some minor changes. It went back before the planning board at their last meeting, and it was scheduled for a public hearing. So this will be the first public hearing in September.
So has the language of it changed substantially since the city council recommended it to the planning board?
I don't recall exactly what the recommendations were. I don't think there's been substantial changes to it. I don't have the document in front of me. I think we adopted 184 days of, was that the final number we came up with? 184 days? And some, I don't think we've come up with a fee for it yet. We haven't had that substantive discussion. That's up in the air, so we'll see it. But essentially, it remains the same in terms of the council's request, I believe. I think I've been true to that. Yeah.
Okay, any other committee business? Liaison reports?
The Historic Overlay District is still in committee with the planning board. I anticipate that there'll be another meeting on that in the near future. Then it will go back to the planning board for their recommendations and whether to send it on to the council or not. So That's still in committee meeting.
Subcommittee.
Subcommittee meeting
Planning board.
of the planning board.
Anyone else? Liaison reports? No? Okay, citizens request to comment on current agenda items. This would be the appropriate time in our agenda tonight for anyone with us in the audience who wishes to address the council on any matter that is on tonight's agenda.
Thank you.
You're on.
I'm Lynn Thomas.
Please use the microphone.
I'm Lynn Thomas. I'm the co-chair of Belknap County Democrats, and we are here to ask your indulgence as we're planning this picnic at Levitt Park for August 25th, and we've put in requests for
Fee waivers.
two waivers. One is for the fees, and it was recommended to us to fill out the paperwork, which we've done, to request a waiver of the fees. We're really running very tight on money, and I believe it was $175 total.
75 for the special events permit, no, 75 for the events permit and 100 for the special events permit. And it was suggested that we ask for a waiver of those fees. That was one request. The other request, we were also said we should come here to ask for.
Please use the microphone. I can't-
I'm sorry. We were also told, my name's Catherine Farkas, I'm the secretary of the Belknap County Democrats. We were told to come here to ask for a temporary traffic order for the exclusive use of the parking on Washington Street that abuts Levitt Park for the day of our event.
So explain what you want Washington Street for.
Pardon?
What do you want Washington Street for?
Parking. We
For-
just want the parking that's adjacent to the park.
The designated spaces, but we'd like them reserved for our use.
And so we said, we were told we had to ask for a temporary traffic order to reserve those parking spaces for people coming to the event.
In the lot itself.
Yeah, well, we have the 3 lots that are in the park, but adjacent on the west side, on Washington Street, there are parking spaces right on the road.
Oh, roadside parking.
Yes, I'm
Oh,
sorry, I
okay,
wasn't
all
clear.
right. So you don't want anybody else to be able to park on the roadside parking on Washington Street?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. Anything else?
No.
Okay, we'll get to this under new business then.
Okay.
Do we need to stay? We should stay?
You might in case any other
Sure.
questions come up.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else wish to comment on an item that is on tonight's agenda? Oh, okay, we're to the city manager's report. Mr. Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So included in your packet for this month's meeting is the financial and operational trends. I will give you one update before I get into that, is that Messer Street Construction is looking to mostly come to an end this week. We're reclaiming on Wednesday, and we'll be paving on Friday. So there'll be certainly some punch list stuff afterwards, but we expect to have that back in very good shape, all things going well, the remainder of this week on Friday. So we thank the public for their patience and indulging us on that project, which is needed. And we did water, sewer, drainage work, and obviously now reclaiming the road. So thank you all for your patience on that. To the report that is included in your packet, we'll start at the top of page 1. The building permit values, that ties again into the assessing year, which begins April 1st. So we're running just short of $6 million in new building permit value, up a little bit from a year ago, but you can see by comparison, almost half or a little over half of where we were 2 years ago. So kind of slow and steady wins the race as far as the new construction goes. The remainder of the numbers I'll tie in with our fiscal year for the most part. So fiscal year just beginning July 1. This is really a 1-month snapshot of where we are. So I'm not going to go into too much analysis and trends going into 1 month a year. But You can see for the property tax collection on page 2, along with motor vehicles, everything is very solid there. Those are our two largest revenues. Again, 1 month of overtime in a busy time of year. I don't want to start looking at trends, but you have all the overtime information there as well. No real changes in any of the balances regarding the impact fee accounts or the various trust balances or the TIF balances. What I'd like to focus on, and I'll get back to page 5 of the report, but bring you to the very last page of the report, is the ambulance expense through the close of June 30th of fiscal year 19. We had numbers in our July, or you had numbers in your July agenda, but we still hadn't fully closed out the fiscal year. That meeting was very early in the month. We still had another week of payroll, the way the calendar fell, and other expenses. So this is a much more solid number at this point of where we are, and we had talked about coming in at the $930,000 range for the annual expense. So we're looking at just under $921,000 for the expense. Realistically, probably the only number that we would expect to change would be the fourth line up from the bottom, and that's the billing collection expense. So as we continue to collect more money from fiscal year 19, there's a percentage that goes to the billing company. But all of the other items that we look at regarding salaries and health insurance, retirement cost, all the operational cost, those we feel are pretty solid at this time. So if we extrapolate out another 5.5%, which is what the QuickMed billing company receives based on their collections, and we collect another $40,000 or $50,000 that we are stating back to fiscal year 19, there might be a couple of $1,000s extra in billing expense, but nothing of significant nature. That's a very solid number, again, with that one exception of where we stand today. So to compare that to where we are for the revenue for fiscal 19, if you turn your report back one page and go down to the bottom Excel sheet, you could see that through the collections we've received for the month, there's $890,000, almost $891,000 collected in revenue. And as I've been saying to you since we started doing the billing of the ambulance, we know there's a significant lag time in collecting revenue going forward, some days 60, sometimes 60, 90, 120 days. So if we did nothing more than look at the April, May, and June figures, where we're only at 61% collected, 59% collected, and 42% collected, and we brought that up to a 65% level, which is very conservative when you look at the numbers going back to last July of 68, 67, 69, 66, 63. If we just assumed a 65% collection, that's going to be an additional $35,000 that comes in just on those 3 months. I can tell you in looking at the comparison from last month to this month, we had an increase in payments we received for every month except for July of 2018. So from August all the way through to June, every single month as an individual month saw an increase in the payment collected amount. In some cases it wasn't a lot, it was $1,000 or $2,000, but in 11 out of 12 months we were still collecting. So this just shows you that there is definitely a lag. On top of that, we have about another $10,000 that doesn't show up in this particular chart, tied to some of the training, the EMS and paramedic training that we're doing in-house now that we collect, and the revenue is credited to this account, but isn't in this billing collection part. And we have a couple of $1,000s that came in from the collection agency when accounts are delinquent and people aren't responding to requests for payment and setting up payment schedules type of stuff. So if you put another $10,000 into the mix there as well, I think by the time we look at this 2 months from now, we should easily be in the $930,000 to $940,000 range for revenue conservatively. So at the end, by the time we close the books on 19, all being said, expectation is we'll be probably $10,000 to $15,000 to the good revenue over expenses. That includes full share being paid to the internal service fund for the expenses and an additional $50,000 being put into the internal service fund toward ambulance replacement, because we're looking to target potentially a new ambulance, every 5 years or 6 years in that $250,000 to $300,000 range. So again, a $50,000 payment went into an ambulance replacement account towards that schedule as well. So very solid with those numbers. For the first year operating, there were a lot of moving parts, a lot of things we learned, but I think we're very comfortable this is going to be cash flow positive as a special revenue account by the time we close the books on it. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions on, I should just go, in the first chart on that page, again, shows just the new fiscal year, the July billables. Again, I expect that number of billable trips, which shows at 241, to go up, because some of those trips probably happened in the very last few days of July, and the billings hadn't gone out, and that's just been a cycle that happens anyway. So, again, too early to start a trend with 1 month into the current fiscal year, but we're very pleased with how our projections came out for the first year of really running the entire operations on this. And certainly credit to Chief Biotti and Deputy Riley for their efforts on this, along with Glenn and John Gardner and folks. So a good team effort on this.
Any questions or comments for the manager? Counselor Hamel.
Scott, for the next meeting, do you think, if available, we could have some kind of report on Motorcycle Week, financial report?
Yeah, we can put that together for you. Absolutely.
Thank
Yep.
Anything else? Anyone else? Okay. Move on then to new business. The first item of new business is that request from the Belknap County Democrats to use Levitt Park and the clubhouse for a Belknap County Democrats summer Blue Bash. Blue Bash. Oh, I get it now. It took me a while. I thought it was Blues Bash, and now I realize it's just Blue Bash. All right, a Blue Bash on August 25th, 2019.
Sounds democratic to me.
And that is, that's a Sunday? Yes. Okay, Sunday, August 25th, from 2 to 7 p.m. And they would like the fees associated with it waived, and they would like a temporary traffic order for them to be able to limit parking on Washington Street adjacent to the park to vehicles attending their event only. So the staff report and whatnot's on page 29. A temporary traffic order as drafted is on page 30 of your packet, and there's a map on page 31. So before we get to any motions here, are there any questions that need answering on the council's part as to what is being asked for here? Do we have a precedent for waiving fees for political parties?
I don't recall the last time that there was a political event in one of the parks, so I probably don't have a great answer for you. I would say I don't know that there's a precedent, but I'm not aware of an event being held in my time here, which is 8 years.
Councilor Hamel?
I vote for everything other than the waiving of the fees. I don't think we should waive the fees. They did have some at O-Pee-Chee Park a long time ago, quite a while ago, but I don't remember if we waived fees or not. I don't think we did.
They have had, excuse me.
Go ahead, Councilor.
They have had these types of events at Levitt Park in the not-too-distant past. I mean, it goes in the election year cycle, so.
I've been, can remember that, and I just I'm just asking whether or not there's a precedent or should be a precedent for waiving fees for a political party.
A legitimate concern. So.
Can you take them up as two separate motions?
Well, the motion that's drafted there on page 29 for you is only a suggestion. A member of council no one has made that motion, so a member of council can make a motion to.
If you want, if the concern was setting a precedent, if you wanted to approve the traffic order and the use of the park, but not waive the fees tonight, we can do a little bit of research and come back to you, and you can just do it with a caveat that if we had set that at a precedent, the council may review that at its next meeting and choose to do something different if they want.
Well, our next meeting is August 26th.
Day after.
So they're doing this on August.
But I think you're basically saying that your expectation is the fees be paid. So if they pay the fees and you want to do something afterwards, we could refund the fees if you found out there's been a
Oh, I see
precedent
what
for
you're
it.
saying.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
So do it kind of under the worst-case scenario, and if you want to, if something turns up that we've been waiving fees for years and you want to be consistent with that, you can have that option and refund the fees to them at that point.
So if any of you want to go in that direction, you could simply make a motion to approve the temporary traffic order.
I'll make
And
that
nothing
motion.
more. So you'll make that motion? All right, so Counselor Hamel moves to approve temporary traffic order 9, and that is the extent of his motion.
Second.
Is there a second for that? Counselor Hosmer seconds that motion. Discussion.
I think this lady.
I'm sorry. Is there any objection to letting this lady speak again?
No.
All right, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, because you mentioned that we'd used Levitt Park several times in the past. We'd only rented the clubhouse in previous years. We hadn't got a permit for the whole park. So this is the first time we've got a permit for the whole park, as well as renting the clubhouse.
Okay.
There's an
So-
Levitt Park Association that rents that.
So you pay a fee to the Levitt Park Association for use of the clubhouse?
We paid the rental for the use of the clubhouse and so this is the first time we have paid.
But because you're spilling out into the park, you need a
Yes.
special event fee or
Yes, that's
permit.
correct. That's correct.
So have you paid the Levitt Park Association in the past fees related to?
To
event-
use their clubhouse, yes.
Okay.
So because they're spilling out now, they have
Right.
to have a special
I get
event
it.
permit.
Yeah.
So the question would be, from a philosophical standpoint, should we be waiving fees for a political party for a special event?
That's the question.
All right, thank you. All right, so the motion did we get a second for that? You seconded, Counselor Hosmer seconded, thank you. All right, so we have a motion and a second to approve only the temporary traffic order at this point in time. Any discussion on that motion? All right, all those in favor, please raise a hand. 6 votes in the affirmative, it's unanimous, so that temporary traffic order passes, and you will be expected to pay the fees. Okay? Thank you. Okay, we're on to page 32 of your packet, which is Resolution 2019-20, which is on the following page, 33, relative to the fire department budget. I think this is pretty self-explanatory, but just to remind the public what we're talking about here, the council last year, in 2018, passed Resolution 29, a copy of which is attached on page 34, which had the effect of limiting the use of overtime to pay for staff shortages, a shift shortage, I should say, in the fire department. And in this year's budget, when we approved this year's operating budget for the current fiscal year, we knowingly added money to the budget that gives the fire chief some flexibility to use an amount of money to fund, per his discretion, back up to the 9 level.
That was 14,000 if I remember.
I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but it's not enough to fill every shift. And I think when Chief Biotti spoke, it was focusing on the key weekends, the 4th of July weekend, heat wave weekend, like I shared with the council a few weeks back that I authorized just for public safety to bring a staffing up. And his intent was to focus more on daytime shifts where they're seeing the bulk of their EMS calls as opposed to the nighttime, and he would have the ability at his discretion, time of year, weather conditions, special events, whatever, to make that. It is certainly not going to be every shift is filled every time there's a first vacancy. The funds just aren't there, and he would still need to work within the available funds that you already approved with the budget. But it was, I don't want to say it was 14,000, but it was not a large increase in dollars, and I think when we did the calculation, it potentially could cover a first vacancy somewhere around 25 or 30% of the year. It's definitely not going to be every shift.
So from a procedural standpoint, in order for the fire chief to avail that extra money that was put into the budget this year for that, we need to change the wording of the resolution, because under the old resolution,
He couldn't do it.
even though the money's in the budget, he can't use it for that purpose. So this modifies the resolution to say that under certain circumstances or under certain limitations, and the limitation would be the extent of the budget that's available to him, that he can use that money for filling that ninth position, but if that money is gone, then he can't do it anymore.
Correct.
So he's got to be judicious on spacing it out during the year. Everybody understand that? Sorry, I didn't explain that better.
I understand it, which we
So we're simply
allocated,
modifying the language.
we allocated money to deal with this issue. And in order for the fire department to access it, we've got to amend this resolution.
We've got to modify our instructions, yes.
Wasn't that, that amount, was that separate? At 14,000
No,
roughly?
it was just an increase in,
It's blended.
I mean, I can do the math and get you the number if you like, but I mean, part of the increase is just due because salaries went up and there were COLAs and that type of stuff, but the true real increase in the fire department budget was through, let's see, so under personal coverage went from last year's budget of 32 to this year's budget of 39,000, so 32,000 to 39, but again, you've got to factor in just general salary increases that incurred. We went from 40,000 to 47,000 in extra duty coverage. We went from 30,000 to 37,000 in sick and injury, and we went from 50,000 to 57 in vacation. So 4 different $7,000 amounts totaling $28,000 was the increase. But again,
And there was a little bit back in the EMS budget
in
as
the
well.
EMS budget. But again, part
But
of that
it's not
went
a
to.
special, if your question is it a separate line item, no, it's not. It's blended into the,
Correct.
so in effect, he would be regulated by the overall amount for those. Counselor Cheney?
I'm at a bit of a loss. He has used some of that money with your approval for the heat problem.
He approached me requesting it, and at that point, we were 3 weeks in between meetings, and the council hadn't had an opportunity to act on this resolution. I should have had this on the last meeting in July, and I didn't, so not wanting to have minimal staffing on a weekend that we knew we were running mid-90 degrees and humidity, he approached me and said, I would like to do this, and administratively, I said, that makes sense right now, and that's why I shared that information with you. This formalizes it so that he would have the ability to do that under that situation or any others within the available dollars that you've approved during the budget process.
I guess my point is, there is a means to do it apparently now. I'm not sure why we have to, I mean, I would assume.
Well, I mean, not put words in the city manager's mouth, but the city manager, in effect, just said he took the liberty
I understand.
of violating the council's policy from a year ago, knowing that this was going to be on our,
Yeah, I understood that. I guess what I'm saying is, can we amend this policy to formalize the manager's ability to do that?
we could do that instead of this.
It seems,
I would really not want to be that I've got to document and let you know. We have things like Pumpkin Fest or holiday weekends or a weather emergency, and I would hate to have the chief come to me for $28,000 out of a $3 million budget, and every time he says, can I have one extra person? Sometimes an emergency might arise, and I would hate to be that that was it. I prefer where we've modified it, that within existing dollars, the chief is a department head. He runs a crew of close to 40 people, or if not 40 people. I think for that small amount and the discretion, my trust is with the chief, would be my recommendation.
Anyone else want to weigh in before we get to motions here? Okay, a motion to be in order to approve Resolution 2019-20 relative to the fire department budget as presented to you on page 33. Counselor Hosmer makes that motion. Is there a second? Counselor Bowens, I'm sorry, seconds that motion. Further discussion? Counselor Lippman.
so I think I agree with the motion in terms of, it is in the scheme of the entire budget, it's something that we have already budgeted. I guess the only other thing I sense that might be helpful to the council feeling comfortable with it in the long run is to have some reporting against it on some interval in terms of how it's actually used.
I can ask the chief to provide me a monthly update as to how many times he filled a first vacancy on a shift, and just report it out to you.
Now, this says for
Hamel?
the first platoon shift.
He was focused on the first shift because that's when the majority of the calls are coming in, ambulance-driven, and being able to operate and respond with a second ambulance and sometimes a third ambulance. And especially now where we're counting on that revenue, we really do not want to be losing that opportunity to have to call for mutual aid when somebody else is going to generate that revenue.
I mean,
Go ahead.
we have a chance to revisit it if we don't like the way it's operating, and I think I'd be willing to give the chief the discretion, as long as we have some transparency on it.
And just to be clear, first platoon, you really got to read it as the first platoon shift vacancy. First platoon is not referencing daytime, although the chief indicated that with that small amount of money, that's where predominantly he's going to be placing it. That's where we track, and that's where we see the calls being at a higher volume. So I want to be very clear that first platoon does not mean just the daytime shift. If there's something going on a Saturday night of Labor Day weekend, and we've got fireworks and different things going on, and the chief feels that having a ninth person on the overnight shift makes sense, that's going to be his decision. But it's talking about filling that first platoon vacancy.
Well,
Counselor Bounds?
go ahead.
So,
Sorry, Counselor
Scott,
Hammond.
so we're talking totally $30,000?
Roughly.
Which is already approved in the budget.
Okay.
And the chief mentioned this during his budget presentation, that he had added that in for that specific
We
reason of
approved
having
it
some
in the budget
flexibility.
and noted at that point in time that if we approve this, we got to change the policy because you can't use that money unless.
I understand. But collectively, with all the accounts that you mentioned, it comes to about $30,000?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm comfortable with this as long as we follow Councilor Hamill's suggestion of some kind of regular tracking of what's
I
going
will
on.
get that to you on a monthly basis.
That was his thing, not mine.
Oh, that's what I meant. What'd I say? Councilor Lippman.
He's Lippman.
I get into trouble with that.
I'm Lippman?
No, he.
Oh, he's Lippman.
All right, any further discussion? All right, so we're going to vote on approving Resolution 20. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Any opposed, please raise a hand. Thank you. We have 5 yes votes, 1 no vote. The motion carries 5 to 1.
Looked like two. Was there two names?
2 voted yes, correct?
I voted no.
I'm sorry?
I voted no.
You voted
Put
no?
my hand up too quick, I guess.
I thought I saw you raise your hand. Okay. Well, I correct the vote. Counselor Hamel voted no, my mistake. So the vote was 4 votes yes, 2 votes no. The motion carries 4 to 2.
Can I just make a comment, Mayor?
I'm sorry?
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
We were unanimous, though, in approving the money for the budget.
May I make a comment? My opposition,
may.
my opposition is not to them using the funds. I'm a little bit uncomfortable with the manner. And I understand the manager's hesitancy, but I would have preferred, that was my opposition, not to them spending the funds, but how the choice is made.
Understood, thank you.
Mine was the same thing.
Okay, we'll move on to the next next item on the agenda, which is on page 35. Agenda, and that is to amend City Code Chapter 235 zoning and updating numerous sections to reflect the recent adoption of the new urban commercial zone. Mr. Myers, who's going to take this?
I can just give you the overview. What you're doing tonight is moving this to a public hearing, and this ties in with mainly a lot of housekeeping changes and updates based on the new zoning regulations that the council recently adopted. I will share one, what I think is a very positive piece of news, is our planning director, Dean Trefethen, reached out to legal counsel and said, do we have to have 10 or 12 separate public hearings for each chapter of the ordinance? And suggesting strongly to the attorney that we did not want to do that, and they structured a way so basically we can have one public hearing, and within that one hearing, we can just say, does anybody want to speak to Section 17? Does anybody want to speak to Section 22? And only have to open and close one public hearing, Mayor. So I think that's very exciting news.
I appreciate that.
So again, everything here is mainly just housekeeping and updating based on the changes to the regs. And Dean, anything you want to add?
Okay,
That's
so
good.
tonight, we're expected to approve this on first reading, and then schedule a public hearing for August 26th,
Yes.
correct?
Yep.
Any questions before we get to motions here about what we're doing? A lot of pages here of technical changes. All right, so the first motion would be in order, would be to waive the reading of the ordinance number 2019-235 tonight and to read by title only. Counselor Hosmer enthusiastically, thank you, makes that motion. Counselor Cheney seconds it. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise a hand. 6 votes in the affirmative, that motion carries unanimously. Next up is to move the first reading of ordinance 235, amending sections 17, 22.3, 30, 32, 35, 36, 40, 42, 43, 45, 48, and 54 of Chapter 235 zoning. Counselor Hosmer makes that motion. Counselor Cheney enthusiastically seconds it. Your hand wasn't quite that high, though.
Sorry,
Okay.
the
All right.
excitement's driving me crazy. Come on.
Any discussion on first reading here? All those in favor, please raise a hand. 6 votes, very high. Thank you. That motion carries unanimously, and then we need to schedule a public hearing. So a motion be in order to schedule a public hearing on resolution, where is the number on that? 235. For our regular meeting, August 26, 2019, during the regular city council meeting to gather public input prior to adoption on each one of these chapters or sections. All at the same time. Counselor Hosmer makes that motion. Counselor Cheney is getting better at his seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise a hand. 6 votes in the affirmative, that motion carries, and that public hearing has been scheduled. Thank you. Okay, next up, we are on page 46. This is a request to schedule a public hearing on the possible placement of a ballot question on the November 5, 2019 municipal election ballot pertaining to the permitted operation of New Hampshire lottery sports betting within the city of Laconia. Mr. Myers?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So attached on the second page, you have an excerpt of House Bill 480, which was passed by the legislature and signed into law by the governor, that legalized sports betting in New Hampshire. Similar along the way to Keno, for those of you who remember Keno a couple of years ago. It's a local option choice, so in a city it needs to be placed on the next municipal election ballot. In a town, it would go through a town meeting process. A little bit different here in the sense that Keno, if someone qualified and met the criteria and passed the background check, you can have unlimited Keno locations if a community approved it and those businesses applied for a Keno license. Under the sports betting, the language of the law says there will be 5 internet or web-based companies to provide services for sports betting in New Hampshire. And the thinking is those will be some of the big players who are out there, kind of the DraftKings and those types of companies that are out there doing some of that in different parts around the country. beyond beyond the 5 internet base, there will be 10 specific storefront locations or business front locations in the state, and that's the maximum amount. So if there were 20 or 30 people eventually who applied to be a sports book operation with a storefront, a business front, the state's limited it to 10. I don't know if 10 was the number because there are 10 counties, but one would think that the placement would not be adjacent to each other if the intent is to try to cover various parts of the state, but I don't know that specifically. The sports betting will be overseen by the Lottery Commission. They'll be doing a review process of how many people submit and determine qualifications and financial wherewithal and all of that type of stuff. If a location is selected, the municipality still would have the right to reject that location. So even if something was placed on a ballot to approve it, the voters approved it, and a specific location came up, if the city council did not feel that was an appropriate location, they would still have one more opportunity. So all you're doing tonight is basically moving this to a public hearing for 2 weeks in order to get public input. After the public input, the council will be asked to vote whether or not you're wishing to place this on the ballot for the November 5th municipal election. And similar to Keno 2 years ago, voters will go and either say, yes, we're in favor of having a physical storefront in Laconia, or no, we're not in favor of that. And based on how that vote goes, we would either be a community that potentially could have a location if someone applied, or if the voters said no, if you placed it on the ballot, then we wouldn't. But regardless of that, my understanding is up to 5 internet-based providers are still going to cover New Hampshire. And one more thing, we are required, just as we did with Keno, if you do approve it to place it on the ballot, we're required to have one more public hearing that's tied into the state law within between 15 and 30 days of the municipal election. So wherever that date falls in October, we'll be required to have another public hearing just so people can chime in at a date that's closer to the election.
Are we required to have this first public hearing?
You are not required to have this. We looked back
We
at.
could stop it right now if the council just didn't want to even consider this.
I probably would say, I probably would not recommend that. If you said that you didn't want to have.
I'm not asking
Right.
whether that's good or bad, I'm just asking.
I would be a little bit uncomfortable saying you could vote no tonight. Probably legally you could, but I don't think it's properly noticed to people that you're taking action on this. So I think people coming down tonight, or who may have come down to speak to it one way or the other, are only assuming that it's going to a public hearing in 2 weeks, and that would be their opportunity to provide input to you. So.
Okay, Councilor Littman?
I'd like to put the motion on the table for consideration for the public hearing.
Councilor Littman moves to schedule a public hearing during the August 26, 2019 regular city council meeting on the possible placement of a ballot question on the November 5th, 2019 municipal election ballot pertaining to the permitted operation of New Hampshire lottery sports betting within the city of Laconia. Seconded by Councilor Bounds. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise a hand. 6 votes in affirmative, that motion carries unanimously. Okay, next up is a request to designate Fairmont Street in Lakeport from Elm Street to Belvedere Street a no parking zone on both sides of the road. You have a memorandum on page 48 of your packet that says that a resident on that street approached the city and said that because it's very narrow, only 13 feet wide, he or she doesn't think there should be on-street parking. Anything to add to that?
The request came to the city. I asked our Public Works Director, Wes Anderson, to go ahead and take a look at that. Wes is here tonight if you have any questions for him. I know that Wes reached out to Councilor Hosmer, and I believe Councilor Hosmer went there as well and visited it, as it's his ward, and I would defer any further comment to Councilor Hosmer at this point.
Wes and I visited the area. I wasn't familiar with the street prior to this. It is extraordinarily narrow. I think one of the concerns we had were emergency vehicles able to get down that road if people were to park on the side. And based on my observations, the answer would be no. So the idea that anyone be parking there and inhibiting emergency vehicles as well as other residents trying to back out of the driveways just seems to be unwise.
Okay, any other questions or comments before we get to making motions here? All right, a motion be in order that the city council approve to designate both sides of Fairmont Street between Elm Street and Belvedere Street a no parking area. Counselor Hosmer makes that motion. Counselor Cheney seconds it. Any discussion? All those in favor of no parking?
Mayor.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
I always like to see us put stuff like this on the table to make sure that there aren't any other contrary opinions that are considered just as a matter of principle, but I don't have an opinion one way or the other. I just think it's good practice to make sure it's been vetted.
Sure. I wouldn't have any opposition to that and give an opportunity for someone to come in and speak if they have a different
So you
opinion.
want to move the table to the next meeting?
Yeah.
All right, so Counselor Littman moves to table the motion to the next meeting.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Counselor Haynes. All right, we're going to vote now on whether to table or not, okay? All those in favor of tabling, please raise a hand. 6 votes in favor of the motion carries, and this matter will be placed again on the agenda, Madam Clerk, at our next meeting under unfinished business. Okay, and speaking of-
Mayor, would it be difficult for the city to notify the residents on that street?
I think it'd be very easy. I think there's 3 properties that are impacted by that stretch, and one brought it to our attention with a request, so we can certainly just shoot a letter to all 3 of them, just saying it was on the council agenda, tabled, and if you're interested, the intent, I believe I can say the intent would be to, honor the request and or approve the request and make it no parking. If you want to chime in to support that or some contrary opinion, the meeting's on August 26th, so we can do that.
Okay, we are to unfinished business. We have 2 housekeeping items, and these are, have to do with the resolutions we had the public hearings on that no one spoke at earlier tonight. So for a second time, we're going to have third and final readings of these 2 resolutions about the borrowings for public works projects, number 16 and number 17. So first of all, we'll take up third reading and approval of Resolution 16 relative to authorizing the city manager to take any actions necessary to issue bonds for Court Street reconstruction Phase 2, fire engine replacement, and adding a new public works truck in the total amount of $2,025,000. Of note, the city has secured a 2.05 interest rate for a 10-year borrowing on this issue. So the first motion to be in order would be to approve waive the reading of this resolution, which is number 16 in its entirety, and to read tonight by title only. Counselor Hosmer makes that motion. Counselor Pound seconds it. Any discussion? All those in favor of waiving reading, please raise a hand. We have 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion carries. Second up is a motion to approve third reading of Resolution 16. Third reading?
We had the second reading technically a couple of meetings ago, so this is actually a third reading of it.
Okay, we just keep reading away. I'll move a third reading of Resolution 16, a resolution relative to authorizing the city manager to take any actions necessary to issue bonds for Court Street reconstruction Phase 2, fire engine replacement, and a new public works truck in the amount of $2,025,000. Counselor Hosmer makes that motion. Counselor Bound seconds it. Any discussion? All those in favor of third reading, please raise a hand. Thank you. 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion carries unanimously. And again, a move to affirm the approval of Resolution 16 of June 24th, 2019, a resolution relative to authorizing the city manager to take any actions necessary to issue bonds for Court Street reconstruction Phase 2, fire engine replacement, and a new public works truck in the amount of $2,025,000. So motion be in order then to reaffirm the resolution we passed on June 24th. Counselor Hamel makes that motion. Counselor Hosmer seconds it. Any discussion? All those in favor of reaffirmation, please raise a hand. Thank you. 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion carries. And finally, we're on to Resolution 17, relative to authorizing the city manager to take any actions necessary to issue bonds for Endicott Street Water Line Project, Court Street Bridge Replacement Project, and sewer upgrades to Union Avenue and Lakeport Elm Street project in the amount of $2,250,000. And of note, the city, as I said earlier tonight, has secured a 2.75% interest rate for this 20-year borrowing. So a motion be in order to waive reading of Resolution 17 its entirety and to read tonight by title only. Counselor Hosmer makes that motion. Counselor Littman seconds it. Any discussion? All those in favor of waiving reading, please raise a hand. 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion carries unanimously. Next up would be to move a third reading of Resolution 17, a resolution relative to authorizing the city manager to take any actions necessary to issue bonds for Endicott Street Water Line Project, the Court Street Bridge Replacement Project, and sewer upgrades with regard to the Union Avenue and Lakeport Elm Street project in the total amount of $2,250,000. Counselor Hosmer makes that motion. Counselor Lippman seconds it. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise a hand. 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion carries unanimously. And very finally, we need to reaffirm the approval of Resolution 17 on June 24th, 2019, a resolution relative to authorizing the city manager to take any actions necessary to issue bonds for Endicott Street Waterline Project, the Court Street Bridge Replacement Project, and the sewer upgrades, specifically Union Avenue and Lakeport Elm Street projects in the amount of $2,250,000. Counselor Hosmer makes that motion. Counselor Lippman seconds it. Any discussion? All those in favor of reaffirmation, please raise a hand. Thank you. 6 votes in the affirmative. That motion carries, and the motion is approved unanimously. Council comments.
No mayor, no comment.
Silence on the part of the Ward 1 counselor tonight. Quite disappointed. Anyone else? No council comments tonight. Any other business to come before our meeting tonight? If not, I'm going to declare this meeting adjourned at 8:21 p.m. Thank you. Yay for that.